So the next speaker brings us to a different part of the world. He is the Director of Green Economy and Impact Innovations at the Council for Energy, Environment and Water, which is a leading think tank in India. He has led really big initiatives to bring clean energy to rural economies, thereby actually transforming them. And when I checked out his profile, I thought, he's actually what many of me and my friends wanted to become when we were 20 years old. We all wanted to become change makers. People who go out there and actually, with a lot of persistence over probably more than a decade, change policies, change norms to make big changes happening. So I'm very delighted that we have Abhishek Jain with us today. He's not going to come on stage right away, because before he wants to share a little story with you. But maybe you can give it up for the little story and then for Abhishek again, our next speaker.
కూరగాయలు 4 రకాల కూరగాయలు తీసుకొచ్చాము. కాకర, వంగ, అరటి, టమోటా తీసుకొచ్చి కట్ చేసి అవి డ్రైయర్లో వేసి 2 రోజులు ఎండిన తర్వాత మళ్ళీ తీసుకొచ్చి ప్యాక్ చేసి మార్కెట్కి పంపిస్తాం.
అందరికీ నమస్కారం. నా పేరు మల్లేశ్వరము. మా గ్రామం వచ్చేసి ముసలిడి గారిపల్లి. మేము అక్కడ వచ్చేసి డాక్రా మహిళలు అందరం కలుసుకుని ఒక ఆలోచనతో శ్రీ గాయత్రి మహిళా ఏపీఓ అని రైతు సంఘం ఏర్పడాలనే ఆలోచనతో 2014లో మేము ఆలోచన అమలు అంటే రిజిస్టర్ చేయడం జరిగింది. అప్పటి నుండి కూడా వ్యవసాయ పైన మాకు ఎక్కువ మొగ్గు చూపుకుంటాం. అంటే మన పంటలు ఎలా చేయాలి, దీన్ని మార్కెటింగ్ ఎలా చేయాలి, మనం రైతు అదనంగా మార్కెట్కి పోతే చాలా ఇబ్బంది పడుతున్నాడు. పచ్చి సరుకు నిల్వ లేనప్పుడు రైతుకు నష్టపోతారు కదా, అది ధర పడిపోయినప్పుడు సోలార్ డ్రైయర్స్ అమ్మ మేము ఒకసారి హైదరాబాద్లో చూసినాం. ఇట్లాంటి కొంతమంది పోయిన మీటింగ్స్ అని ఏదైనా డౌన్లో ఉన్నప్పుడు మార్కెటింగు రైతుల దగ్గర సరుకు తీసుకొని ఎప్పటికప్పుడు ఏదైనా కానీ ఎండు పెట్టింది అయితే మాకు నిల్వ ఉంటుంది కదా, అలాంటప్పుడు మీకు పల్లెలో ఇలాంటిది ఉంటే 10 మంది రైతులకు ఉపయోగపడుతుంది అనేటట్టు మా మీటింగ్లో చర్చించారు. అంటే మాకు ఎక్కువ కరెంటు బిల్లులు కట్టేది ఒకటి మాకు చాలా బెనిఫిట్. దాని తర్వాత 20 అంటే మాకు పగులంతా కరెంటు కోతతో పని కాదనేది ఒకటి లేదు. కరెంటుతో పని లేకుండా పని చేసుకోగలుగుతున్నాము. అంతా సూర్యరశ్మితో విధానం మాకు ఎలాంటి ప్రాబ్లం అయితే లేదు. దీంట్లో కటింగ్స్ వచ్చేసి పేపర్ మనం ప్యాకింగ్ ఎలా చేయాలి, దాన్ని ఇక్కడ డ్రైయర్లో ఎన్నాళ్ళు ఎండబెట్టాలి, దాన్ని మళ్ళీ ఎలా సేవ్ చేయాలి, ఇలాంటివి వాళ్ళతో మేము మెలకువలకు చెప్పుకుంటూ ఇంకా ఒక 5-6 మందికి పని ఎక్కువ కల్పించిన వాళ్ళం విన్నాము.
ఇది పెట్టిన తర్వాత ఇక్కడ నీడపాటును కూర్చొని ఇక్కడే పని చేసుకుంటాం. ఆదాయం కూడా ఇక్కడ చాలా ఎక్కువే వస్తుంది. చేసేదానికి గుడికి శ్రమ తక్కువ, ఆదాయం ఎక్కువ.
ఎంతైనా ఏ సరుకైనా కానీ మనకు ఇన్ని కేజీస్ వచ్చేసి డేట్ వేసి మాకు అడ్రస్ దానికి ప్యాక్ చేసేసి మేము ప్యాకింగ్ అంతా ఇక్కడే నేర్చుకున్నాము. ఇంటి దగ్గరనే మొత్తం ప్యాకింగ్ చేసి వాళ్ళకు రహేజ్ కంపెనీ వాళ్ళతో మాకు వాళ్ళ అడ్రస్ అంతా మాకు పెడతారు. మేము ఆ అడ్రస్ని పంపించేసి వాళ్ళకు ఆ కంపెనీకి పంపిస్తాం. మాకొట్టి ఆల్రెడీ మాకు వాళ్ళతో రేటు ఫిక్స్ అయి ఉంటుంది. ఏ సరుకైనా కానీ మాకు ఇది పోదే ఎక్కడ నిలవ ఉంటుంది అనేది అయితే ఎప్పటికీ మాకు ఆ భయం అంటూ లేదు.
In the Powering Livelihoods program, through these buyback models, what we've seen is that it was a win-win situation for the enterprise as well as the end user. For the enterprise, we looked at supporting them in regions that they would not have explored otherwise, particularly with women farmers. Whereas for the women farmers, this was a consistent market where the enterprise was buying back their product, and it instilled them in a confidence to adopt a new technology. A third aspect that the program has brought in is with the financial institutions. For a financial institution like an NBFC or an MFI, this is an entirely sustainable model, and it gets their buy-in to support this ecosystem.
మాకు ఇప్పుడు సోలార్ డ్రైయర్ అనేది 80% సబ్సిడీతో ఇచ్చారు. సో సబ్సిడీ బోను ఎంత వచ్చిందంటే మిగిలిన అమౌంట్ 1,32,000. ఆ 1,32,000 మాకు సమున్నతి వాళ్ళు లోన్ ద్వారా ఇచ్చారు.
అలానే రైతు కూడా ఈ మన సోలార్ ఈ పల్లెల్లో ఇక్కడ మనకు అందుబాటులో ఉండి కూడా చాలా ఆనందకరంగా అలాంటివి కూడా నేర్చుకుంటూ దీంట్లో ఆదాయాన్ని పొందుతూ ప్రతిదీ కూడా మహిళనే సాధించగలిగే అంత నేపథ్యము నేర్పరి వాళ్ళకు ధైర్యం అంటే ఎవరు లేకుండా ఇక్కడ ఒక కంపెనీ చిన్న సంఘం ఉంది. ఇక్కడ మనం ఎప్పుడైనా కానీ ఒకదానికి ఒకటి బేస్ చేసుకుంటూ మేము ముందుకు పోగలుగుతున్నాం.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Florian, for that beautiful introduction. So what you just saw here was one of the story of change. One out of the 40,000 stories of the 40,000 livelihoods that we have changed over the last 4 years. These are women, men from the rural India who are now earning way more than what they were earlier. Our impact assessment says that at least 30% more income per user, with a range of solutions that we have been supporting. From small horticulture food processors, where a single machine can process more than 100 different fruits and vegetables, to fodder growing stations in arid areas which can help cater rearers with fresh green fodder using hydroponics, to solutions like waste biomass being used to actually provide cooling through cold storages, to solutions like horticulture produce getting dried, as you saw, and many, many more. These are just a few examples that made this change happen. But it was not just about unlocking these livelihoods. It was also about unlocking the actual financing for many of these users who could not afford these solutions. So we unlocked about 500 plus loans in the last 2 years itself. And these are the loans where many of them are to women, where this was the first time ever in their life they have gotten a formal credit. So this is not just about getting a new technology adopted. It is also about becoming part of the actual financial ecosystem. And imagine that these solutions are not even in the radar of the financial institutions. They do not know that these solutions exist. And then if you're trying to actually tell them, okay, you can actually fund them, finance them, there are obviously a lot of questions, like, do these work? Do these actually generate income so that the money can be paid back? Would there be defaults because these are first-time users who are lending or taking on the credit, borrowing the credit? So we had to work with financial institutions over the course of few months to actually give them data that what is the kind of income that is increasing, what is the kind of paybacks that we are seeing, and that's convinced them slowly. So after knocking maybe 10 doors, a couple of financials came on board. And that's how we unlocked a lot of these loans. But that's not all. Many of the enterprises that we are supporting, who are actually manufacturing these solutions and taking them to the users, have managed to raise about $8 million worth of commercial financing. And this is happening even at the biggest of the national stages. Shark Tank India, 3 of our enterprises have been to that platform. One of them have actually also got money from the investors. So we are also making this story, as Sophia was saying, from margins to the mainstream on the national television. But that is also not all. We also worked with policymakers. We've worked consistently right from the middle of the COVID until about a year and a half ago to actually get a policy going for this sector. This is the first of its kind policy anywhere in the world for small-scale renewables to be used for livelihoods. Now, all of that is needed when we say a sector building. You can have individual enterprises, which are very much needed, but that's not sufficient. You need the collective, as Sophie said. And that's what we have been doing in the Powering Livelihoods program over the last 4 years or so. It's a program which marries what we call traditionally enterprise acceleration. And it is not just an accelerator program for maybe 2 months or 6 months. We actually work with these enterprises for 3 to 5 years. And it leverages the enterprise acceleration to do what we call ecosystem acceleration, which means that you're not invested in just the success of one enterprise, but you're actually invested in the success of the entire sector, the entire ecosystem. When you take the portfolio of these enterprises to financiers, they listen. When individual enterprises go, they do not. When you take the case of the entire sector to the policymaker, they listen. When individual enterprises go, they do not. That's what we have been doing. And this is, at one end, is about those 40,000 livelihoods. But for us, there's a much bigger cause here. And that bigger cause is these solutions can actually impact 37 million livelihoods just in India alone. And imagine if you also take these technologies to the global south, beyond India. And there is a $50 billion investment opportunity behind these solutions. But this is still just one sector. After sort of trying our hands and learning, dirtying our hands over the last 4.5 years, we have realized that what we have built here in terms of an ecosystem building approach can actually be used in many other emerging green sectors. Whether you talk about battery manufacturing, whether you talk about floating solar panels on the coasts of western and east coast of India, whether you talk about using waste biomass for biomaterials to replace a lot of the fossil fuel-based materials in the economy, whether you talk about, again, this one entrepreneur who is using bagasse waste from sugarcane to actually create sustainable packaging that is being exported to 43 countries right now. Whether it is leveraging that biomass for bio-CNG, whether it is circularity of plastics, whether it is circularity of e-waste, whether it is leveraging bamboo from incense sticks to wall claddings to floorings, whether it is leveraging seaweed for a substitute to plastics, nutraceutical applications, or even for biofuels. Or it is about sustainable tourism. These are just a handful of possibilities I'm sharing. There are many more. And we collectively call them a green economy paradigm. I know the word green has been abused, overused, but there is still a lot that can be done. We analyzed about 40 such opportunities. I just showed you a handful of them. And they collectively can create 55 million new livelihoods in a country like India. So even for India, this is a big number. And it can add almost 1.8 trillion to its GDP by the year 2047, when India celebrates its 100 years of independence. Now, when I think of green economy, we do think of energy transition. I think that's the first thing which comes to our mind. You talk to anyone, give us examples of green. People will talk about solar panels, they will talk about wind turbines, and maybe they will also talk about electric vehicles. While that is very, very important, I think we do need to go beyond. We need to reimagine not just energy, but also materials in our economy. What kind of materials we are employing? Because a lot of energy is actually going into just producing those materials. Half of the industrial emissions globally just come from two commodities. And we heard about that earlier in the day, cement and steel. Right? So unless we start asking the question around what materials we are using, we're only going to solve this problem half-heartedly. What's also equally important is looking at a design transition. Choosing not just the design for our products and services in a different way, but also the design of our supply chains. How longer the loops are versus how shorter the loops are. Design of our urban spaces, how mixed use is happening, how much we are actually eradicating the need for transport at the first place, instead of only thinking of electric vehicles as a way to transport. And how we are even designing the economies as a whole, right? And that's where the bioeconomy, circular economy as a concept come in. And as you think about this all, climate action or environmental action or sustainability action is really not about environment. It's about an economic transformation that we need not just in a country like India, but across the globe. Now with that, let me just make a final submission, which is like, after the limited success of what we have done with Powering Livelihoods, what we're now going to do is actually do sector building for many, many more green sectors. And that's the mission that I am on. And I'm looking forward to collaborating with many of you on that mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. I think we have the right to take a seat when I ask my questions. Okay, Sophie,
Yes.
Abhishek. Okay. Oh, sorry. Well, fascinating presentations. Thank you very much. I think the first question is to bring in the audience, and it goes to you, Sophie. Why isn't all entrepreneurship social entrepreneurship? And what the person means is, how did it become acceptable to harm other people and the natural environment for the sake of profit?
Thank you for the question. Quite provocative. I appreciate the engagement with the thoughts I shared earlier. So why is not all entrepreneurship social entrepreneurship, right? I think it should be, right? This is in line with the thought process I was presenting earlier, which is this idea of how can we make the economy more social, but not in a way of opposing the social entrepreneurs, or social entrepreneurship is doing good, the other ones are harming the others, but integrating both. And it's true that social entrepreneurship came in origin as a term in two ways, right? So one origin of the word social was by opposition to economic, right? So if it's not economic, it's going to be social. But also the social actually comes from work in psychology that is a short for pro-social, pro-others. And so this dichotomy was helpful to distinguish the concept at first and understand, how different is social entrepreneurship from traditional, I don't even know how to call it, conventional, I use some of these adjectives in the presentation as, all of economic actors are not evil in a sense. I think we need to maybe take a step back here. So what I'm saying here is that dichotomy was helpful at the beginning to differentiate from other economic actors, but today, I think we're better off thinking in terms of integration and integrating social entrepreneurship in the mainstream. And one takeaway that we can gain from studying social enterprises is their tactful balancing of multiple goal achievements, right? It's true in many corporations, there is one goal that is getting precedent, and this is oftentimes for listed corporations, but not, do you know how many entrepreneurs are listed on the stock exchange? Very few, right? So, and if you look at the entrepreneurship research, you also learn that the main reason for starting a venture is not harming people and planet, is actually for independence. A lot of entrepreneurs want independence, maybe financial independence, but also freedom of organizing their day as they see fit. Right? And so the long story short is that we have a lot to learn from these social entrepreneurs to maybe teach other for-profit, not necessarily social corporations, but that really care, and starting to care because stakeholders are caring as well. It's a bit of a long-winded response, but I hope I brought the nuances you expected.
It wasn't an easy question. I think, Abhishek, you want to contribute?
Yeah, I wanted to add briefly. I think one thing which Sophie touched upon in her presentation was the systems thinking, right? And if you think about it, many of the businesses which seemingly are creating challenges today, whether it is plastics, whether it is fossil fuels, when it all started, none of those adverse impacts were actually visible. So systems usually have a lag, right? In fact, when fossil fuel came about, we actually solved the problem of culling whales, right? Before that, we were dependent on whales for a lot of our energy needs. So back then it was, maybe it was regarded as social entrepreneurship when it actually started, because you're solving some problem, right? But it's only in the course of time that you actually start realizing that what are the feedbacks in the system which are adversely impacting. When plastics came about, they democratized a lot of access to food in the form of food packets, in the form of even FMCG products and so on. But now you realize the consequences of microplastics, right? So I think what we also need, especially in the research community, how can we fast track learning from these feedbacks so that we don't actually spend 30 years before the problem becomes too big to be managed? Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, then question for you, Abhishek, and I try to add what I want to know because I was impressed by the impact that you showed. And I think as educators, we probably want to bake change makers through, letting them run through our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year programs of education. If I want to bake a change maker tomorrow, what are the skills that I need? And what is probably the learnings from you about changing politics? And then I ask a quick follow-up question that is related to what I'm receiving here. I want to bake a change maker. What skills do I need?
Yeah. I think one thing is to actually bring about systems thinking as a very important concept in whatever we are teaching. Especially, I think in engineering, and I'm an engineer by training, we learn very well how to sort of break a problem into very small segments and solve it segment by segment. But in that myopic view, we do miss sometimes the big picture. And system thinking in general can be overwhelming. So actually enabling tools, giving a language, helps people then think through it slightly better. That would be first thing. Second, I think we need perseverance. If the academic world can give you a paper out after 2 iterations, that policy change needed 50 iterations, right? So you do need perseverance. You do need to understand people a lot better. Everyone is working with certain constraints, certain risk perceptions, certain incentive structures, and certain values. If you're not able to connect with people with their values within the constraints in which they're operating, you will not be able to actually make change happen. It's very easy to other ourselves and say, oh, they are not getting it. Why the policymaker is not getting it? But there is a clear incentive structure with which they are playing. There is a clear constrained game within which they are playing. So understanding people, and now the point to the politics. Politicians also have a very clear set of incentive structures, risk perceptions that you need to manage. Why are we talking about green economy and not climate action? At the end of the day, it is all about climate action, right? But by actually focusing on the jobs, the livelihoods, the economic prosperity, you make it politically relevant here and now today for a developing country to take action, right? That's the piece that I think is very important for the future change makers, if I may say, to learn. How do you not just think about the technological innovation, which is very much needed, or any kinds of innovation for that matter, but also build the narratives which will travel to the different stakeholders where they are and meet them where they are.
Thank you. And Sophie, people are interested, how can the state help enable social entrepreneurship given the complexity of the innovation system and the many different options that the state would probably have? What is good examples that you've seen?
This is I think a difficult question because I have examples of great experiments that didn't necessarily succeed. I'm thinking here of the social impact bonds. I can expand on that a little bit, but it's true that this question, thank you for it, because it comes right into this idea of acting in a collective, in a mob of meerkats, where social entrepreneurs are partnering with different actors, including the states. If you go back to the way that social entrepreneurship was perceived 15 years ago, social entrepreneurs were seen as solutions to markets. That could be the first question. And now government failures, right? But we see it's not really the case because one actor alone is not achieving the impact that's expected given the complexity, as you pointed out. So I think the more direct is supporting social entrepreneurs. I don't think in legal forms. I think the legal forms can be good or bad. I think there's a lot of contingencies there. But maybe having programs where social entrepreneurs are actually directly targeting maybe needs that have been identified at a city level. So I work now a lot at the community level. I started with the individual heropreneur. I moved to organizational understanding of the business models and so on. But now, after 10 plus years of research, realizing that where change happens is actually in communities, and I think your presentation beautifully showcased that. And so with that in mind, maybe government is not, it's not the Belgian federal government or like the federation in Switzerland. It's maybe much more lower scale where social entrepreneurs can partner and get intel what really is needed and where there are shortcomings. Of course, bearing in mind your excellent point at the end of the shortcomings of each actor when it comes to the ways of seeing, the prism through which they see the situation. But I think there's a lot to be done there, and I'd love to work with such coalitions in partnering through highlighting issues or funding, but it depends on the I think the political up and down and budget, I think with that regard. But lots of hope there.
Awesome. I want to thank you, Abhishek, for the impact that you are generating and for the great presentation. Really enjoyed this. I think we can learn something here. Thanks for having made the way to here. And Sophie, thank you for the always inspiring overview of social entrepreneurship and making the connection. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.